right. So, hey guys, welcome back.
Hi, Pastor Rebecca. Hi, Daniel.
Yeah, we're live again. Really live.
We're live.
Like, no edits live. Pretty awesome.
It's gonna be fun without a net.
We'll be all right. We'll be all right.
You know what that means.
So why are we gathering? Why are we having a live one, Pastor Rebecca?
Great question. So we're gathering live because yet again we're pulling in another special guest, and our special guest is she's in Japan right now. We're going big with this King Street Kids Q&A, and so
International.
what?
We're going international.
International. We're going international with King Street Kids. And we just wanted to have this King Street Kids Q&A live with our special guest. You actually know her, Pastor Eric.
I do. We went to college together. This will be the first time that I've got to talk with her in 25 years.
Ooh. So yeah. You want to say?
It's like pretty bad, huh?
Yes. So without further ado, why don't we bring our guest into the chat, Pastor Sarah Enrique Wilson, who is a pastor, a missionary in Japan. So without further ado, let's bring in Pastor Sarah.
Live from Tokyo.
Woo! All right, I hit admit. There. All right. Yay! It works.
Hey, there it is.
Hey,
Hey, Pastor.
Hi there.
How are
We're
you?
so glad you're with us.
Yeah, thanks. It's really fun to do this. It's weird that I'm in a different day than you are. But
It is. So
Friday morning.
You are okay. So it's 9:00 p.m. Eastern time in America now. You are 11 a.m. Friday in Tokyo. So you can essentially predict the future. Is that how, what happens tomorrow? Can you tell me how tomorrow morning goes?
Yeah, the sun comes out and COVID cases drop. So it's good.
Okay.
You should come into the future.
Okay, good. All right, I just wanted to clear that up. Good. All right.
Awesome. Well, this is fitting because normally our King Street Kids Q&A airs on Friday morning, so we could technically say it's Friday morning somewhere. There you go. Yeah. So it's really good to see you. So for our boys and girls, do you want to just go ahead and introduce yourself and say a few words?
Sure. So hi, everyone. My name is Pastor Sarah Wilson, and I am a missionary pastor here in Tokyo, Japan, which is really the biggest city in the whole entire world. If you count like the whole continuous area, it's about 40 million people, which means that everything is very built up. We are lucky to live near green because there's not a whole lot of it here. If you go to the top of a very tall tower in the center of Tokyo and look in every direction, all you see are gray apartment buildings and houses. It is not a city known for its natural beauty. But most of Japan is really very beautiful. There's lots of mountains and forests and rivers. About 70% of it actually has nothing built on it, not even any farms, because it's so mountainous. So it's a very extreme sort of place, either tons of people or nobody at all. Wow. And I've been living here for just about 2.5 years with my husband, Andrew Wilson. He is a professor at the Lutheran seminary here. He teaches church history. And our son, Zeke, who is 15 years old and a freshman at an English language high school here.
Okay. So are there Lutherans in other parts of the world too?
Oh my goodness, we're in nearly every part of the world. Not necessarily in huge quantities, it kind of depends. So like here in Japan, we're pretty tiny. The Japan Evangelical Lutheran Church that we work with has only about 20,000 members. And there are 2 other Lutheran churches. One has about 10,000 and one is, I just think, 5,000 or 6,000. But that doesn't mean Lutherans are doing particularly bad. It means Christians are doing particularly bad. It's only about 1% of the whole population of Japan that is Christian. In fact, many people still think about missionaries going to a place like Africa. Well, the truth is, Africans do not need our help. There are about 8 million Lutherans just in Ethiopia. So they're doing just fine. Actually, Asia is the place where Christianity is least developed. And of all places in Asia, Japan is the least developed. Even China and Bhutan have percentage-wise more Christians than Japan does.
Wow.
So you have important work important work there.
Well, let's hope so. We're in a long line of work. I mean, the first missionaries came to Japan about 500 years ago. They were welcomed at first, and then the local religious establishment really turned hard against them and persecuted them very severely. So Christianity more or less vanished for about 350 years. There were some hidden Christians, as they're called, but they had no contact with the rest of the Christians in the world. And then when Japan opened up again, it actually like literally closed all of its borders for about 200 years. When it reopened in the 1850s, then missionaries started coming in, and there have been missionaries here ever since. But it is a tough nut to crack. And I would say in the past number of decades, and especially since the big tsunami and earthquake, you might remember back in 2003, I think, the number of missionaries has declined even more rapidly. So any of you children out there, if you hear a whispering in your heart to be a missionary, think about Japan. Start studying the language now. You need a lot of time to master it.
So Pastor Sarah, we talk about missionaries. How would you define what is a missionary? How would you tell our boys and girls?
That is a great question. Well, I'd say there's two kind of ways of thinking about missionary. Kind of two classes of missionary, let's say. So one kind of missionary, which is the kind that my husband Andrew and I are people who go from one country to another, but they work with a church that already exists. So in our case, we're not just dropping in out of nowhere into Japan and trying to start our own church. There is already, like you said, a Lutheran church here. And so we have been sent from our church in America to help out here with the Japanese ministry. So my husband's doing that by teaching future pastors at the seminary, and I'm doing it mainly by serving in an English language congregation here in Tokyo. You might be surprised to learn, actually, that the large majority of members at my English congregation are actually Japanese people, not native English speakers, but in various ways they've learned English and they really like to worship in English. So actually, strangely enough, that's how I can help out Japanese Christians, by giving them English worship opportunities. So that's one kind of missionary, helping an existing church. And then another kind of missionary, which is probably the more kind of original sense of the word, is going to a place where people have never heard about Jesus at all, don't know anything about God or the gospel. And so you go and you make contact with people and you tell them for the first time. And often that means discovering a language that has never been written down before and trying to learn it, and beginning the process of translating the Bible into that language. Missionaries, Christian missionaries, have done more to preserve small minority languages across the world than anybody else ever has. The Bible often is what creates a written language and allows people to preserve their literature before a bigger language group comes along and basically wipes it off the face of the earth. So that's a pretty cool side benefit. But of course, the primary benefit of such mission is teaching people about Jesus who have never, ever heard of him before.
Wow. Thanks.
That is it's such important work. Do you know, I don't know if Pastor Rebecca and Daniel know, or if you remember, Barbara Nuding, and maybe Pastor Sarah, do you know Barbara Nuding? And she's a parishioner at the St. Matthew's. She and her husband, Norm unfortunately died in 2017. They were missionaries in Japan for a long time, for many years.
Oh, wow.
And so I've learned a little bit about how important your work is from her. That's important work. Can I ask a question? Was it difficult? Was Japanese a difficult language to learn?
You say it in the past tense, like I have learned it.
I
have not learned it. My husband actually spent about 2.5 years doing nothing but learning Japanese. It's kind of been understood since the beginning that missionaries need a full 2 years full-time language study before they can even start. And I really mean like start. So I've been studying much less aggressively in that time. And I've always been pretty good with languages, but I would say now after 2.5 years, I'm just at the point of being able to formulate stumbling sentences, and I get the general gist of conversations if I already kind of know the context. Like at church council meetings, I can more or less guess what's going on, but that's more like plucking words out than understanding whole sentences. If I do understand a whole sentence, like I feel totally wowed. It's probably the most distant from English or European languages of any large language group on the planet. It's probably harder than Arabic. certainly harder than Chinese. Its grammar and way of forming sentences is just not like ours.
Wow.
So yeah.
Wow. Yeah.
So needless to say, I'm happy I can do my preaching in English.
Yeah. Good thing you're at an English-speaking congregation.
Yes, I would be pretty useless. I have attended and participated in the Japanese services, and I say some lines, but I really feel like, I'm just reading off syllable. Even when I know what they say, it feels a little bit artificial to me, but they don't seem to mind having me do that. So.
Okay.
So what is a typical day in the life of a pastor in Tokyo, Japan look like, or just what is your typical day all around look like over in Japan?
Yeah, well, I'm probably not the best representative of that because my call is actually half-time. And because we draw people from all over Tokyo, which, as I mentioned earlier, is enormous, Sunday is really the only day we can meet in person. It would just be too long of a commute. I mean, people often come an hour or two just to get to church, and then they have to go back again. People here work very long days. So even if we had something in the evening, it would be difficult for people even to make a 7 o'clock appointment on time. Mostly. So my only day at church is on Sundays, and that's where we do everything we want to do in person. So worship, of course. When we have Bible study, we have a group for the kind of official members of the English congregation. One thing about church in Japan is that you have a lot more non-members who are nevertheless regular attenders at your worship services for various reasons. And I would say pretty much every Sunday, I can assume someone who is an adult who is not baptized will be in the service. And so that has changed my preaching. So I don't just speak to the congregation about the fact that you have been baptized, but I always issue in addition an encouragement to get baptized if you have not yet been baptized. So that's been an interesting kind of switch in my mental state. And we used to have fellowship activities, of course. Now we're not allowed to eat together, except communion. We do have communion again. That's been really good. So when we would have, parties sometimes and things like that. One thing that's happened since the pandemic is that we started doing a Wednesday night Zoom prayer fellowship, just half an hour, but anyone who wants to can hop on, and we just share an interesting item from the week and then a prayer request, and we pray together at the end. And that's been a good addition, and we've kept it even now that we're worshiping in person again, because it's the only realistic way, again, in such a huge city, for us to be in touch with each other during the week. And so everything else I just do from my home office. I don't know actually how often other pastors here do visits to people at their home or in their workplace, because like I said, work is pretty frenetic here, and people are pretty private about their homes. Even when they socialize, they tend to go out to a restaurant more than have each other in their houses. So I couldn't really say there. On Andrew's side, we live right here on the college and seminary campus, so he can meet with students in person and go to class right here and, do his work that way.
Remind me again, what subjects does he teach?
He teaches church history. So this semester he's teaching his first course in Japanese for the seminary students, and it's on modern church history. So like everything after the Reformation, basically. There's one other church history professor here, so they'll share the various areas as things go along.
Did I hear that right? He teaches all in Japanese?
Yes and no. All Japanese people study English. Most of them claim not to understand it. There's actually a huge number of English loan words in Japanese. So if you don't know what the word is in Japanese, you can usually just kind of pronounce an English word in a Japanese sort of way. Like there's rules for turning an English word into a Japanese word, and almost always it's recognizable. So he uses that strategy. And also there is a bilingual, actually an American who grew up here. His father was a missionary. He's lived here his whole life. He's going back to seminary for a second career, and so he does a lot of translation help in the seminar. But it's basically all in Japanese with help. So yeah.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, I know. I'm so glad it's not me. Holy cow.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I mean, when I lived in Thailand, we studied Thai for not nearly long enough, but those tonal languages are no joke.
Oh yeah, Japanese is not tonal, but its challenge is that its grammatical logic is like nothing like English. I remember the first time doing a dialogue, I came across a sentence, and every single word was in the exact opposite place you'd put it in English. Like it was literally like all the way around. And so like even now that I'm beginning to understand better, the prospect of ever like uttering a sentence in the correct order seems beyond possibility. But obviously it is. English speakers learn Japanese, so they probably are just better students than I am.
Yeah, Daniel and I were both in Yagam and went to Malaysia different years, and we got about 2 weeks of language training in Malay. But um, mad respect for like learning Japanese and then teaching it. That's crazy.
Yeah, yeah. Fortunately, he loves learning languages more than just about anything, so this is a really good fit for him. Yeah.
Nice.
Now, if I remember correctly, Pastor Sarah, you earned your PhD at Princeton or Yale?
Princeton Seminary, yeah.
And you studied theology?
Mm-hmm. Systematic theology.
So how did systematic theology help you be a missionary in such a foreign place, in a different culture? Did that help?
Well, I think theology is helpful for everything, including just how to live your life. But before I came here, I worked for almost 8 years at an institute for ecumenical research in France. And there, my job was to be a specialist in Lutheran theology who could then enter into dialogue with Christians from other theological traditions. I particularly specialized in Eastern Orthodoxy and Pentecostalism. And even though those aren't like ethnic groups or countries, they are, in a way you could think of foreign ways of being Christian. They're still Christian, but it's a different way of being Christian. And so I think, the reason I got that job is because I had a background in theology. And so while I was there, I was able to spend a lot of time thinking about like, how do you translate, when you have a common experience, but you use maybe a different set of rituals or a different set of terminology, and bring different kind of expectations to it. And also in that work, I spent a lot of time traveling and visiting Lutheran churches around the world, as well as meeting Lutherans from different parts of the world. So that gave me some kind of on the ground practice of how to think about what is the same of the gospel, and then how does it maybe just look a little bit different from place to place. Actually, I would say, strangely enough, in Japan, it doesn't really take that much to adjust, because modern Japan is not like samurai movies, and it's not like manga or Studio Ghibli movies. Speaking of which, Studio Ghibli is in our town, so we visited there. So if any of you were fans, we've been there. It's very cool. But actually, modern Japan is so shaped by its post-war occupation, basically by the United States, and the new constitution that was given, and the new economy that was given. And so part of the question about being here is like, what is the true Japan? A lot of people come here looking for this very romantic, like ninja warrior sort of thing, or geisha girls or whatever. That's not Japan anymore. Japan is very Americanized in a lot of ways. There's, obviously deep roots from its own East Asian tradition as well. But when you get to a church, like the churches are so westernized, you don't really see anything almost ever that looks Japanesey in a church. And our first reaction was to think like, well, gee, that seems very like colonial, or like we came in and told them how they were supposed to do things. But actually they like it. This is their positive choice. I was told that they never use the traditional Japanese word for candle when referring to the candles in church because it sounds too Buddhist. They like to say kendaru from English, and that sounds more Christian to them. And so, occasionally there's more, I would say, things that feel to me more Japanese, like at funerals, they fill the open casket with fresh flowers. Like they pull all the flowers off the bouquets, and people come and actually lay them around the corpse in the coffin and just kind of like bury them in these fresh, beautiful flowers. It's really profoundly moving. But then all bodies here are cremated. You're not allowed to bury at all here. And so then you go with this body full covered with flowers to a crematorium and say goodbye, and then that's the end of it. So that felt more Japanese and less American. But otherwise, if you walked into my church, there's very little that would tell you that you were in Japan and not in America.
So the appetite in America for religion seems to be sort of on the wane. How, is Japan a religious country? And what are the major religions?
Yeah, that's that's a question missionaries discuss all the time. So in one respect, just like if you went to Europe, you would see churches everywhere. In Japan, there are shrines and temples everywhere. So shrine is the word for a worship site for Shinto. And it's kind of considered like the older of the religions in Japan. It's So like when you say the word religion for what is traditionally in Japan, it really does not mean what we mean when we say religion and are thinking of Christianity or Judaism or Islam. Like those three kind of all make sense in the same category of religion. But what Shinto and Buddhism are, you could call them religion, but you're probably going to be confused. Yeah. So Shinto is like what originally way back in ancient times and up to the future, Japanese people recognizing very distinctive natural places like a waterfall or a big rock or a special tree. And they have this feeling that some kind of special spirit lives in it that's called the kami. And they say that there are 8 million kami in Japan. And actually that word kami is the word that they use for God in Christianity, which seems really weird to me because if you can use the same word to describe one thing or 8 million things, I just don't think it's the same thing at all. And Shinto is, I would say it's more like a good luck kind of culture rather than a religion. People will go and there's a little ritual you go through at the shrine and they have traditional festivals, but it's really about just kind of trying to get good luck and stack the deck in your favor. It's not like devotion or obedience or worship in the way that we mean it. And then about 1,500 years ago, Buddhism comes along from China. Some people still say that Buddhism is a foreign religion because it's only been here 1,500 years. So you can see how that makes things really hard for Christians who have been here at most 500 years. And Buddhism kind of said strategically, let's just put our arms around Shinto. So almost every Buddhist temple is going to have a Shinto shrine on the same grounds. And they just kind of said, well, the ordinary people who don't know better, they can have their good luck Shinto stuff. But, those who are enlightened or want to be enlightened, then they learn more about Buddhism. And just like Christianity has lots of denominations, Buddhism has lots of denominations. And there are several that are indigenous to Japan, apart from the ones that are in China and Korea. And then that kind of Buddhism is very different from like Thai and Indian Buddhism. So that probably just confused you more than anything else, but you'd be in good company because we're all like super confused by religion. And then the fact is that this is all everywhere, and yet Japan is super, super secular. I mean, it is very non-religious. People like the seasonal festivals, they'll participate in them, but I would not call it religious devotion or faith, anything like we mean by it. They seem to be, like many people in the West as well, devoted to money and status and progress far more than to a religious way of life.
That's interesting. It makes me wonder, so like over here, we have, of course, on a more, church side of things, we're in Advent, we're preparing for Christmas, we're having that lead up. And you could argue that there's this secular side of like we're in a more commercialized side of still this appeal of goodwill and peace and leading up to Christmas and whatnot. But curious, like how do holidays like that any major holidays that are related to different faiths, how do they get recognized in culture over in Japan?
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
I've seen America get more secular too, but honestly, America is crazy religious compared to Japan and most of Western Europe. So it's not as bad as you think it is.
Okay.
We still watch, Linus say, that's what Christmas is all about, Charlie Brown, and we all get teary about it. So, okay, Christmas is wildly popular in Japan. In fact, like you thought it was bad in America, but I swear on November 1st, I went to Starbucks because Starbucks is everywhere here too. And everything had turned red, green, and gold, and they had Christmas carols nonstop on the speaker. And it has not stopped since. You get 2 solid months of Christmas here. And there are decorations everywhere and Santas and I saw Rudolph the red-nosed reindeer, like from the old claymation thing on somebody's front porch in Kyoto earlier this week. I mean, and the music, it's just nonstop music. It's so loud. So, yes. And like by our train station, there's this huge light display and everything. None of it is religious Christmas. It's all like, secular Christmas stuff, but it is everywhere. And then this is even weirder. Christmas Eve is the most popular date night of the year in Japan, not Valentine's Day, Christmas Eve. I have no idea how this happened. Like you cannot, the first year we were here, we had 2 services. So my family and I tried to like go out to dinner, and like you can't go anywhere nice because they're all booked solid with reservations for romantic dates. So we had to go to this weird Korean place that had melted cheese, and like why there's melted cheese on Korean food, I still don't understand. And then the other weird thing is that if you're not on a date on Christmas Eve or Christmas Day, you go to KFC. Somehow KFC has convinced the entire nation of Japan that Americans eat fried chicken on Christmas, especially fried chicken from KFC. And so like they do, I don't know, like a third of their business of the whole year on Christmas when people go. And you like see, they have Colonel Sanders. They still really love Colonel Sanders there. And like you see the bucket and it's all like red and gold and has little Christmassy pictures all over it. You get your family size Christmas Day bucket. So, very weird. And a lot of people non-Christians come to churches on Christmas Eve as a kind of like cultural tourism kind of thing. So, and for instance, my church never has communion on Christmas Eve. We have our sort of like Christmas communion on the last Sunday of Advent because it will be primarily Christians present there. But on Christmas Eve, at least half of the congregation will not be baptized. And it's so awkward to try to like, say like, if you're not baptized, actually people seem to love getting a blessing here. They seem to like, non-Christians seem to be really happy not to get communion and are really like excited about the blessing. But still, it's just like weird to have a sacrament when you're turning away like half the congregation. So the previous senior pastor came up with the idea of having people lay a piece of straw, like not drinking straw, but like manger straw, in our baptismal font, which is actually a traditional Japanese manger. It's this gigantic stone like bathtub looking thing. And so people, at the end of the service, they come up, they take a piece of straw, and they're encouraged to say a prayer. I think probably most of them make a wish instead, and lay it in the manger. And that's kind of like the physical, non-sacramental act for all the tourist non-Christians who come to a Christmas Eve service. We'll have this year, we haven't normally had Christmas Day services. This time we will, but it's a normal workday. It is not a federal holiday or anything. So we expect it will be mostly retired Christians who show up for an 11 a.m. service on Christmas Day. And then we will, I think we'll have communion because we can count on it being mostly Christians who are there. So that's the weirdest Christmas imaginable, in fact.
It sounds that's so interesting that the secular, that a country would embrace the secular, and it's fun. I love it, but it's funny, Pastor, as I think about the folks that come to Christmas Eve. Our Christmas Eve will be different this year because of the pandemic, but on the typical Christmas Eve, the people, without exaggeration, at least 1/3 of the parishioners who come for Holy Communion, I've never seen before. I don't know if they are tourists maybe that are traveling on Christmas Eve and Christmas, or if they are people in the town who they wanted to come to church on Christmas Eve. And in parishioners, there are some, the CEOs, the Christmas and Easter only. There are many of those. So I often wonder, what are they getting from these these rituals? And is it the same for others who are sort of there on the ordinary days too? So that's
I think every pastor puzzles about those people who show up on Christmas and Easter, kind of happy, kind of defiant, don't bug me to come back in between. So, well, to give another example, there's a Japanese guy who he's come at least twice a month the whole time I've been here. And so like about 6 months ago, I was like, oh my gosh, I'm a terrible missionary. I haven't talked to this guy about getting baptized at all. Because I knew he wasn't a Christian. And I've been here for 2 years. Like, come on, missionary Sarah, get your act together. So I was planning a new member class for people who were already Christians, but joining the congregation. And so I just, in a very casual way after church mentioned to him, I'm going to have this education class and you can come if you like, because he was eager to improve his English. That's why he says he comes. And, you can think about getting baptized. And he immediately froze up. He's like, I'm not getting baptized. I'm not getting baptized. I was like, okay, sorry I said anything. And I asked my church council and some other missionaries I know, like, why does someone go to church so regularly with no interest in being a Christian? And they're like, oh, well, your only mistake is that you asked after 2 years. You should have waited for 8. And normally 6 to 8 years is the amount of time it takes for a Japanese person who is like regular in their participation to be willing to go through with baptism. So in a very weird way, so at your Christmas Eve service, probably all the people who come for communion got baptized at some point, and it probably means very little to them, but you're off the hook giving them communion, that's on them at that point. But in Japan, people feel so strongly about not getting baptized. They kind of have the feeling like they get it better than we do. Like, if you are baptized, you are marked. You are marked with the cross of Christ forever. And for a lot of Japanese people, that still is somehow, even though it's not like taking them out of Buddhism or Shinto, but it is somehow taking them out of ordinary Japanese life. I find that my parishioners who are Japanese, like, that's actually something they need. I almost have the feeling like the burden of being Japanese is so enormous on them because it's is famously a rather more conformist culture. I think being a Christian is like a genuine like release or liberation for them. But for people who have a less awkward relationship with their home culture, to be a Christian is really to make a break. They get that baptism is a certain kind of death and rebirth, and they will not do it lightly or indifferently. So in a strange way, I've come to kind of appreciate that, even though, even as a pastor, I don't think church is so awesome that I would go all the time if I didn't believe anything that was being said in the service. So, yeah.
Now, is part of that culture, the hesitation maybe, is part of that culturally? Like, I know when I was in Thailand, it was a similar situation because, one of my coworkers was actually like disowned by her family. She grew up, her whole family, very devout Buddhists. She had some physical handicaps and was told, that's because of a sin you did in a past life. But when she converted and became a Christian, she lost a lot of her family. Now, is that similar in Japan?
I have yet to meet anything remotely like a devout Buddhist. I'm sure they exist here, and I'm probably not in the right place to find them. But overall, people are not devout. In fact, the previous senior pastor here was in a Christian rock band, and he used to get together with a Buddhist rock band because they figured like either way, it would be an improvement. Like they almost didn't care. Like just, something transcendent would be a big improvement over your money and status centered existence. I think in previous generations, there was a little bit more family blowback, especially because Christians stopped erecting altars to ancestors and doing kind of the rites of remembrance for the dead, or like burning fake money for the dead or whatever. But I've been told that is really not the case anymore. I have been told that one of the biggest obstacles now, strangely enough, is that in the 90s, there was this, believe it or not, radical terrorist Buddhist group that set off poison gas in the Tokyo metro and killed several hundred people. You probably didn't hear about it because we only in America fixate on Islamic terrorists, but there, believe it or not, even Buddhists have terrorists. fewer probably percentage-wise. And that kind of, they said, disqualified all religious devotion in Japan. So churches actually saw a significant decrease of interest, as well as, Buddhists. After that, all religion was seen to be suspect. And they claim they're still trying to recover from that image. So, I think the strong exclusive devotion, like the Lord God of Israel, who is a jealous God, asks of us, and attendant monotheism and baptism into Christ's death, it's what we've known all our lives. It seems right to us, but I think it is kind of culturally off-putting, but I don't think it's because they're committed to a different religion. It's because more like they're committed to no religion.
Right. Okay.
Which means money. I know, like, everything you thought you knew about Japan is wrong, right? That's what I feel like my whole life here has been like. And so another thing, like, people love like Zen and like the little stone gardens and the quiet and the contemplation. And like, Japan is the noisiest place ever. Like, everything has like blaring music, and like they have these little video screens in every store talking at you and trying to sell you stuff, and alarms constantly. And it's so densely packed here in Tokyo. Like, it's just nothing like your romantic image of Japan.
I am disappointed that there are ninjas.
There are ninjas.
I'm really disappointed at that.
Well, that's what I'm fixated on.
Yeah.
There are a lot of Bo Peeps, though. There's a very strong girl fashion culture that looks kind of like gothic little Bo Peep. It's
Wow.
it's something to behold.
Is Hello Kitty big there?
Oh yeah, totally. So are actually Charlie Brown and Peanuts everywhere. And if you know the Moomins from Finland, they are everywhere too. That's definitely true that they like cute cartoon things. That's everywhere.
Like Pokemon, that's still big, I guess.
I don't see nearly as much Pokemon as I do like Peanuts and Moomins and Hello Kitty and what's the other one? I don't know. Other ones that I hadn't seen since I was a little kid, and they're still big here.
My 13-year-old son this past summer, he was very interested in binge watching Japanese anime. He really got into that. He was very interested in that. So yeah,
That is really.
You act like he's giving it up.
There's just so much to unpack. It's like one little glimpse, and there's just so much to unpack with everything. It's just mind-blowing over here.
Yeah. Well, my mind is still blown, and I've been here for 2.5 years.
There's so many rabbit holes.
Yeah.
What is your favorite food?
Oh, well, it is true that ramen here is amazing. Like, you can't get a bad bowl of ramen. And we found lots of like specialty ramen. So this is not like the cup of noodle that you just add hot water like you had in college after you'd had a rough night, so to speak. But this is like actually fresh noodles in a homemade broth with lots of little ingredients like soy sauce, marinated eggs, and roast pork, and bamboo shoot, but real bamboo shoots, not like out of a can. That's really good. I have to say, I think sushi is really boring. Like, I was never against it, but we've had sushi here, and it's compared to all the other stuff you can get, it's just really kind of dull, to be honest. So there is an American lady who's been here like 55 years. She's married to a Japanese, and she's written a number of Japanese cookbooks in English. And so I assist her, maybe, 6 to 10 times a year when she offers courses. So I've learned some firsthand about some traditional Japanese cooking from her, and gotten to know the ingredients together, the varieties of seaweed and the fish that's more distinctive to Japan. And tofu tastes a lot better here. Like, when the first time we went home after being here and I tried American tofu, I spit it out. It was so awful to me compared to here. So I have tried to get a handle on traditional Japanese cooking, and there's a lot more to it than sushi, actually.
Nice.
Pastor, the third question. I'm interested to see how Pastor Sarah will answer the third question.
I'm trying to remember what it was.
The third question was, how are you going to spend Christmas? Given all that you've said, how will you spend Christmas?
Right. Well, we have our English language Christmas Eve service. So usually we've had bilingual services, but because of the pandemic, we have to limit our numbers, and we, like I said, expect a lot of tourists. So on Christmas Eve at 6:30, we'll have an English service. We're doing 9 lessons and carols, and then prayers at the end, no communion. And then on Christmas morning, we'll have a bilingual service at 11 for the elderly Christian congregation. And, we'll, as a family, we'll open presents and we'll have some traditional food and cookies and things like that. But one nice thing, so the sad thing about being missionaries is that you never get to go home at Christmas. You have to work. So we have not been able to be with family on Christmas. However, the plus side is that because it's not a federal holiday here, none of the Christians around us are seeing family either. They're all at home. And so the past couple years we've done this, and we'll do it again this year, which is that we had an open house Christmas party on the afternoon of the 25th, and everyone is free because everyone's around. And we've had a great turnout, and people are so happy. Christians are so happy to have a chance to celebrate Christmas with other Christians and actually make it a special day instead of just another work day. So that is how we will finish off our Christmas Day holiday.
Wonderful. That's wonderful. Yeah. That sounds fantastic. What an important job. We talk a lot about vocation, Pastor Sarah, and what an important vocation you have, and your husband, your family. Everybody together you're in this together. So it's so important work that you have. And I'm so glad you spent some time with the boys and girls, and I bet some grown-ups were watching too.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. It's probably past some of the boys and girls' bedtime. Go watch it tomorrow.
Yeah.
That's right.
And we're having go ahead.
I just wanted to say how happy I am that there's an American congregation that cares so much about missions. There's been a huge loss of interest, unfortunately. There have been a lot of media depictions that make missionaries look like bad, mean people who go and ruin local cultures. I mean, of course, there's bad people in every category, but Christian missions have done, like I said, so much to preserve languages, so much to preserve local cultures, have given literacy and education and healthcare to so many people, and of course, above all, given them Jesus. And people respond and they take it up and they make it their own. But there's still work to be done. It isn't over yet. And so it's just really great that an American congregation can look beyond its own borders and its own people and even its own country and see that you're connected to the whole body of Christ throughout the world that has different sets of issues and yet is inspired by the same gospel and brought to life by the same hope of resurrection in Christ. So I'm thrilled that you guys out there are in on this with us. It really makes a difference.
And we're happy to support you.
And we're excited to follow along because we're subscribing to your emails and passing along that information about whenever you send out newsletters, getting that info out to our congregation as well. So we're excited. And so to our people back, to our St. Matt's folks watching, if you want to make sure you get on the email loop, just let us know. But we're excited to hear from you whenever you send out news from Japan.
Great. And if all goes well, we will actually come to the U.S. this coming summer, which we were supposed to do last summer. And if all goes really well, we'll be able to visit you in person, which we hope can happen.
That'd be awesome.
You're probably best you missed 2020 in America. I think it's probably not going well in the other parts of the world too, but 2021 is going to be better.
I have to say it looked pretty rough there this year. Even with the pandemic, Japan did a whole lot better. And I think it's just because people are used to wearing masks. Like they were doing it all the time, even before it started. So it was not a huge leap for everyone to do it.
I read just an article just 2 days ago that fewer than 2,000 people have died in the whole country of Japan. And in Tokyo, 40 million people. So and I suspect you're probably pretty close together there. I think that's amazing too.
Yeah, and we never had a serious lockdown. Like our churches and schools closed for about 3 months, but stores stayed open. People were not required to stay at home. We still moved around. They kind of limited, or they asked people not to travel between regions of Japan if they could help it. but you know, nowhere as severe as most other countries had, and yet still transmission rates were low. It's so low, in fact, people wonder either they're not telling the truth or there's something else, like in Japanese people genetically or in their diet, that makes them unusually resistant. I have no idea what is true, but it has not. I think we've had an easier time of it than you have.
I think, Pastor, that second part's important. I think that this might be a wake-up call for a lot of Americans, that maybe maybe we can get healthier to combat when these bad things happen.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for spending time with us.
Yeah, it was a real delight. Thank you for inviting me to be a part of this. It was fun.
It's good to see you. When you were in the waiting room, I said I hadn't talked with you in 25 years, so it's good to see you. Welcome.
Yeah, you too. You too.
Yeah.
All right. Well, warm greetings to everyone. Happy Advent and Merry Christmas in advance.
Yeah.
Yeah, Merry Christmas.
Merry
All right.
Christmas.
Bye.
Bye.